valve. This is very common. In this case, this is a multi-turn. You can tell it's a multi-turn by this oblong valve. And when you turn it, it requires, you have to keep turning and turning it and turning it. And this one's actually opening it up to finally where it's full on open. These were ones I replaced from being multi-turn. These are compression valves, and that turns it off. This turns it on. In my case, what I wanted to do was to replace all of these because I didn't know how old these valves, they were all this kind. They tend to seize up, they can leak easily and fail. So I just felt it was time to get those replaced. So what I did was I replaced all of the valves in the house with quarter turn. But this one, what I really want to focus on here is the fact that this is a compression valve. Now, when you get these, they have this little, it's called a ferrule and a nut here. In most situations, you're not going to need this because this is going to be the supply line to whatever, your toilet or to the sink, so you don't need that part. And I like to think of these valves as being in 3 pieces. You have the valve, of course, then you have the nut, and then inside the nut is a ferrule. And the way this works is this part goes on first. And in many cases, when you're changing this kind of valve, you actually don't need to replace this part. Sometimes I've had one situation where the compression valve was actually, the compression part of the valve was damaged, and I had to pull it off. There are specialized tools for it. It can be very difficult to do. And in some cases, you may have to cut it with like a pipe cutter that looks like this. This one's for 1/2 inch. They also make them 3/4 and probably for other sizes. But if you're putting it on, all you have to do is put this part of the valve on here first, and then this part comes forward and then screws on counterclockwise. You do not need Teflon tape. And then what you can do is typically when you take them off, you want to use a plumber's wrench to hold this part, and then you're using another wrench to take it off clockwise. So it'll be completely opposite to the next kind of valve we'll discuss, which is a threaded valve. See inside of here, this is a 1-piece valve that's threaded on the inside, and it requires a copper threaded pipe to go onto. It turned out my house had both unthreaded and threaded copper pipe. This kind of threaded valve, you can see this is a multi-turn. It has, when I first looked at it, it was hard for me to tell the difference between this one, put it over here to see it, one of the more common types of valves. But the thing that I did that is different on here is these, I believe these are called hex nuts. And the other telltale sign, if it's a threaded copper pipe, is that it would have Teflon tape on it. So this one does require Teflon tape. This one screws on clockwise, and then you can use, again, I would suggest using a plumber's helper to tighten it. Again, the thing to remember is it's going on clockwise. It goes off counterclockwise, clockwise, counterclockwise. Completely opposite from what you do for compression valves. The way to think about a soldered valve is that it is one piece. And by the way, this one is a straight valve. It's not an angle valve. because it literally comes right out of the floor. Like the pipe here comes out of the floor like this. But the way to think about soldered valves is that they are one piece with the pipe. In my case, I didn't know how old this soldering was. It seemed okay. It seemed like a really good job. But again, I wanted a quarter turn. So what I did was I cut this pipe with, again, one of these guys, this little round cutter, which works great. They have these other ones that have all these adjustable sizes. I personally prefer just buying a 1/2 inch and then a 3/4, which it turns out I actually have 3/4 piping, not inside the house but outside. But I also needed a cutter for that, which I'll just talk about that in another episode, where I had to cut and reroute a copper pipe. But what you have to do here is cut these off, and then in this case what I did was I got a new kind of valve that I'll discuss in a moment. Quick recap. Compression valve comes with these two pieces that actually are attached to the supply valve. At least most of the ones I've seen do. Typically don't need those, because this is going to be where your supply line goes in. Typically you can reuse the compression nut and the ferrule that's already on the pipe, and this is just naked copper pipe. In some situations, if it's damaged, you may have to replace them with this. The thing to remember is that use a plumber's wrench and keep this front part stable. Use another wrench to undo this. These unscrew clockwise, screw on counterclockwise. Threaded valve. Again, as you can see, this pipe has Teflon tape on it. This is a threaded valve on the inside, as you can see. This will tighten clockwise and then unscrew counterclockwise. A soldered valve. In this case, this is a stub. I believe they call it a stub pipe. That's essentially a pipe sticking straight out. But think of this as one piece with the pipe. This is soldered on. If you want to replace it, you have to cut it off. There's no other choice. You can replace it with either, but you could do another soldered valve if you wanted to do that. But you could certainly do a compression nut or a push fit, but not a threaded valve.
This is an example of a push fit valve. If you'll see at the bottom, there is a gasket here. This is actually a rubber gasket, some kind of space age material, and no tools required. You just push this thing onto the end of the pipe. Again, I don't know if they make threaded ones, but this one is just just a naked copper pipe. In this case, as you can see, it's a quarter turn. That's how you turn it off. That's how you turn it on. To remove it, use one of these tools. And the idea is that it will just come right up and just pull. You just push it underneath the rubber part, and it will pull it off. I'm not going to do that now because it's under pressure. I'll be honest, these have been a bit challenging for me to work with. I've had a couple situations where I still get stuff stuck because of this, even using this tool. But it does work eventually, but it can be really challenging.